Hello everybody, what's up, and welcome to the channel where we learn to be true heroes in the world of Overwatch. Today I have another VoD review. This one was sent in by a player named Damon, and he is in Master-tier. Woo, look at that. Yeah, I've gotten quite a few requests to show a little bit higher level gameplay because mostly I do Platinum and Gold and Silver because that's where most of the player base is at, but I figured we'd give it a shot. And I hope that you'll find that higher tier players don't necessarily make less mistakes than lower skill players. They're just kind of different in a different context and shelved around a bit. But anyway, so Damon'S asks about positioning mostly. He says that he feels disoriented during games, that he's not really sure what to do all the time. He's not always sure where he should go. And basically, what is his goal in a game? Doesn't sound like he has a very good goal going into it. So obviously now we're just running kind of the intro part of the game where they're standing up on this cliff. Just some standard stuff, not a big deal. But if we think about the character Zarya, basically what she's trying to do is she's trying to shield as much damage as possible with her shield, get off good ults, and do damage in that approximate order. So let's see how Damon'S positioning helps him accomplish that. But we are about to get into a fight. Now the McCree gets a pick on the Genji, and his Reinhardt is going to be nano boosted. Now he shields the Reinhardt, which normally is not that great because remember, you're supposed to be absorbing damage for your team, and the Reinhardt who's nano boosted is almost certainly not going to die, not going to need a shield. But in this case, there is an Ana on the other team, so maybe shielding to prevent from the sleep is pretty good, but in that case it was still a bit early. Because if we look at when he shielded him, he shielded the Reinhardt way before any sleep was going to come out. So the Ana could just hold it, wait for the shield to go down. If he had waited until the Reinhardt was a little bit lower, it could have possibly baited out the sleep. So whatever the shield purpose was for, it should be to avoid the sleep, but it's a bit too early for that. Not that it really does much anyway. You're going to see the Reinhardt winds up dying up there alone by himself. But that's really just a side note. It's not that big of a deal. It's not the point I want to make. The point I do want to make, though, is so he's going to push this Ana, which is okay because the Reinhardt just went full crazy mode and he has 100 energy. Even though he is definitely out of position here, he just gets the quick Ana pick, which is cool. It's cool. But the real issue comes here. So we're going to see that he walks up, and he gets actually out of his bad position. Now he's in a more reasonable position where he's with his team. He can protect them. He can do stuff with them. It's all cool. By the way, another kind of strange shield on the Mercy when nothing was happening to her. But instead of going back with his team, and this is something that is we're going to see through the rest of the VoD as well, he's going to go back up into the enemy's face. Now he does get the Mei pick, but you can see some stuff happening on the kill feed because his team is all dying. Now I'm sure that his 100 energy plus a shield could probably have done a lot to mitigate the Genji. Now remember, as a Zarya, you're not a flanker. You're there to protect your team. So even if he is getting these cute little picks, it looks cool, it feels cool, but in the reality, this was the result. And we're going to see another thing happens here where he ults, and this is another sort of solo play. Not really. So his team just all died, obviously. We just talked about how his Genji killed everything. The second priority that I talked about with Zarya is getting big ultimates off, game-changing, fight-winning ultimates. This is not a fight, period, because his entire team is dead. So completely wasted ult there. And it's not even like it almost could have worked. It definitely was not going to work. And if he had, we're going to see coming into this next fight, if he had ult here, it would have definitely held them at the checkpoint. So we're going to come up and imagine an ult right here. That would be very, very good. But we're going to contest, we're going to shield, and because of all the stuff that happens, Mercy res a little bit too late, so they wind up getting the checkpoint. Zarya ult there with his team might have turned the tide. So for the rest of this match, we're going to look specifically at his positioning and ults in terms of helping out his team. So we have backed off, they got the checkpoint, and a little bit of poke, it's whatever, build up some ult charge. But if we take a quick peek as he turned around, here is all of his friends, his family, his friends, his loved ones, and they're all going and they're holding over here. But let's see where our hero Damon holds himself. So he's still chilling out here. Maybe get a couple more pokes off. Getting a bit dangerous at this point. But he decides to solo contest the checkpoint. And especially because there's a Mei on the other team, that is, well, that's not going to work against any team comp, but especially against a Mei, that is never going to work. So he winds up going down because he tried, again, to do a solo play. So I've been talking quite a bit about positioning to help your team with Zarya, and that was one of Damon'S major questions. So here we are in the practice range, and let's check it out. Let's investigate this a bit. So let's pretend that this is your team, this is the enemy team, and your team is just sort of sitting here like bots getting shot at and murdered. I guess a lot of people would actually describe their teams like this. So if we're Damon, we're standing here. This is kind of where he was standing all game, right in his opponent's face, literally. We saw a lot of this type of positioning. Now, you can't actually look at your team from this position. You have to do this big 180, so you're either looking completely at your team or completely at the enemy team. This doesn't seem very good for when you're trying to shield your team and do damage to the enemy team. But a fair question might be, well, does this allow you to do more damage? Because that might be a good trade-off, doing a lot more damage being up close versus, being the back and being more supportive. Well, let's take a look. So we're up really close, and okay, well, it doesn't look like we're really losing any damage going further back because the beam, let's check the beam out. Oh, the beam doesn't look like it's really changing much either. Now, this is obvious, but the point is you don't actually do any more damage by being this close up. In fact, you do less damage, and let's check that out real quick. So I'm going to try to shoot at these bots, or track them, that is, with Zarya's beam, and I'm going to be right up in their face. And this is pretty hard because they're making these big, sweeping changes. I need to go whoosh, whoosh, like to track them across the screen. That's very difficult. But if we're a little bit further away, like if we're a little bit further away from this guy, for example, we can see that he doesn't really move much because he's far away. And it's not too hard to track him. Again, track this guy. Remember, we were having trouble tracking him before because he was doing those big 180s on my screen. And again, this guy's pretty easy to track as well. So the further away from people you are as Zarya, up to your maximum range, of course, which is about here, this, what is this? This 15-meter range, 20-meter range. You actually do more damage because you can track people much, much more easily. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, what if we were to stand sort of up here, just barely in front of our team? We can still do the full damage, still do that if we're maybe too far away, and we can still just go boop and see our team real quick. Even maybe stand slightly behind or inside of our team. But that's not all, because so the obvious way I talked about shielding people, shielding teammates, right? The obvious way to do it is by doing that. Bam, shielded, no problem, easy. But an equally effective way to shield your teammates is by doing this. That shielded him just as well. Your own personal shield can be used to block shots just as well as the E shield, the allied shield. So if you have this close position to your team, your self shield is actually way more effective because not only are you blocking your own shots, but you're blocking shots directed at your friends as well. This doesn't really work when you're up close, because if you're up close, maybe you can block one guy on the other team from firing, but you can't block everyone, all other 5 members of your teammate, of their team that is. But if you're near your teammate, then you can block all fire coming from anywhere. Last but not least, for your ultimate, if, let's say, because there's another enemy over here. So if you're here, if you're really close, you can't really see the battlefield really well. You always have to keep looking around, figuring out where everyone is. But if you're far away, in the position we were talking about before, you can get a good idea of where people are, and your ultimate has quite far range. You don't have to be up close to do your ultimate. You can just be like, okay, and now. Whereas if you're up close, it's much more difficult to see those big ultimates. But anyway, we're back, and the enemy team is pushed up relatively far as a result of him getting picked off earlier. Now, he needs to wait for his team, obviously. But at the same time, he needs to be in a position where he can jump down and contest if he has to. This is not really that position. This is, because we're going to see that his team is actually all going to come up here, and he should have been paying attention to where his team's going, and he's going to wind up isolated. Here they start to respawn, and you can see we still have a lot of time to contest. There's still quite a lot of time. We're in no rush at all. But we get a little bit antsy here, throw a launch out, and because we're in this dangerous ground position, look how close we are to the enemy team. We wind up getting attacked and caught out, which forces us to do this kind of bad ultimate when there's no teammates around. And in general, he didn't get to utilize any of his shields, he didn't get a good ultimate off, and he didn't do any damage. So, not that great of a fight, and it wasn't because his aim was bad or because of anything like that, it was just because of where he chose to put himself. Now, this is something that I like to point out every once in a while just because it kind of hammers home an important point, I think. And if you look, Damon actually has gold medals, gold elims, and silver damage, and why not silver objective time. Now, this looks pretty good. A lot of people, if they're sitting here, maybe after the match, they'd be like, oh, I had gold and silver, and maybe this even turns into a gold later on because he does like to play really far aggressively up on the point. That feels pretty good. So, once again, medals do not mean anything. Clearly, from this review, we've been seeing that there's many places that Daben could have been a whole lot more effective. Of course, shout out to Daben, though, for standing in this VoD. He is in Master tier, so he is not a bad player. All of this criticism is in the most constructive spirit possible. So they did lose the last checkpoint. They pretty much just got snowballed. Not much they could have done as a result of their play on the first and second checkpoint. But here we are on attack. And remember, Daben's team actually has a Reinhardt on it. And we're going to see that this role gets a little bit confusing because Daben tries to play the Reinhardt and oftentimes goes in front of the Reinhardt shield. Now, there's another point I want to make, and this is something that might be a little bit of preference, but he did mention in his question that he knows that he has kind of a little bit of issue with aim and also just awareness, seeing the battlefield in general. And something that really is not helping at all is this, and I know people like this crosshair, but this Zarya crosshair does not help at all. Try to look at how much is actually being obscured by this crosshair as we go up. So we come up here, and now there's actually a McCree here that you can't see because he's hidden by this giant white crosshair or a tracer or something. Like I said, I couldn't see, and you can see just how much it's hard to keep track of. Let's actually go check it out real quick. So here we are against an Anabot, and you can see how it's hard to track her because half the time she's being obscured by the circle. Even when it's not charged, you see all of these lines that are very distracting. There's 2 circles, a dot that actually obscures where you're specifically aiming at, and then even more lines on the side. But if you use sort of the normal crosshair, you don't have that problem. You can clearly see whenever she moves around, and you don't have all those distracting lines. So while crosshairs are, of course, personal preference, I think that this specific crosshair for Zarya, and like, come on, we don't need a giant circle to tell us how much energy we have. It's right there. We can clearly see it. So I think that it is absolutely 100% unnecessary and just a bad choice to run that crosshair. I know it's personal preference, but I really suggest changing it to the regular short crosshair or something like that. So let's just take a look at a couple more fights. We see, here we are, we just passed the first checkpoint, we're going up. Again, there's a Reinhardt on the team, but he's gonna go walk past the Reinhardt. And if you look, it's pretty confusing. Like right now, I mean, you're probably confused looking at this perspective. What's going on? We're looking at the car, we're spinning around, we're so close, and now we die. And again, just imagine if he had been a little bit further back with his team. Remember, the Reinhardt was back here. He could see the entire battlefield, probably save one of his teammates from the Mei ult, and all that good stuff. And just a couple more. Now, I'm not cherry picking these, I'm just skipping through each fight. And again, we're very, very close. Can't see much. And so we're going to use a Zarya ult here that hits the shield. And if you, again, further back, you would be able to clearly see what was going on, wait for the shield to go down, all that stuff. Because it's not like this shield was popped like the moment he launched the ultimate either. It comes down, and he's just so kind of in such an ambiguous position that it's hard to tell whether he's shooting into the shield or out of the shield. And again, we get kind of a subpar ult. Anyway, we wind up having a huge push in overtime in the second round, and now a heroic defense again, and his team actually winds up winning. And you can see that David actually plays very well in these hectic, chaotic environments, which is really, really good. He has quite good mechanics, just a little bit better positioning, a little bit better plan going into the game, as we talked about in a previous VoD. And I think that we can maybe get to GM, who knows? Before we wrap this up, if you're still watching, you might be interested. Later on this week, I really want to do a stream, maybe Friday or Saturday. I still haven't decided on the date yet, where I go over some VoDs that I wasn't able to put on the channel and just do them a little bit maybe slower, take some questions from the chat. Maybe if you want to give me your own VoD for the stream as well. Maybe even go over some tournament VoDs also, because for the videos, I like to keep them brief, only a couple points. I don't like to overwhelm you, but with the stream, I can go as slowly as I want, and we can really get to all those cool points and everything like that. So let me know in the comments if you would be interested in something like that, and if we get enough people, maybe we can make it a weekly thing. So once again, leave in the comments if a live stream once a week would be something you're interested in, and what you would want to see in it if you were to come. So anyway, guys, I think that's about it for this video. Hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something, maybe even had a little bit of fun. So anyway, good luck in solo queue, and have a great day. Peace out, guys.